20 years ago, a crime unfolded that would shock the city of Miami and send ripples through the criminal underworld. Isabella Cruz was just a young, ambitious woman with a promising career ahead of her, but a choice she made would lead her down a path that few could survive. What began as a secret affair soon evolved into a dangerous game of life and death. But what exactly happened to Isabella Cruz? How did her life end in the shadows of Miami's most notorious cartel? This story is not what it seems, and what lies beneath the surface will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about this case. Her tragic end is a mystery that still haunts investigators to this day. The people involved are long gone, but the truth remains buried, hidden behind a veil of corruption, betrayal, and bloodshed. What was the real motive behind her murder? And was it truly a case of love gone wrong, or was there something far darker at play? Before we get into the shocking details, make sure to hit the subscribe button, like this video, and drop a comment with your thoughts. We want to hear your theories on what really happened to Isabella Cruz. It all began in the sun-soaked streets of Miami, a city of neon lights, ocean breezes, and a thriving nightlife. Miami is a place where power and danger mix in ways most outsiders could never fully understand. On one side, you have the glamour, the wealth, the heat of the nightlife. But in the shadows, something else lurks, where crime and corruption thrive like the very air the city breathes. Alejandro Herrera, known by those who feared him as El Lobo, was the man who ruled over the criminal empire with ruthless precision. His cartel controlled vast territories and operations across Miami, from drug trafficking to money laundering and every illegal transaction that made him one of the most powerful men in Florida. His reputation was enough to strike fear into even the bravest of men. No one ever questioned him. Those who did disappeared. His empire was vast, and he was its king. He ran the streets with an iron fist, commanding loyalty from his men and silence from everyone else. In stark contrast to Herrera's dark world was Isabella Cruz, a young woman with no ties to the cartel, working as a financial analyst for a major corporation. She had no idea that a chance encounter would pull her into a dangerous web of lies, deception, and death. Isabella was a woman of intelligence and ambition, someone who could have had everything. But she became entangled in a world she never understood. She thought she was in control until she wasn't. Herrera was not just a cartel boss, he was a force to be reckoned with. Known for his cold-blooded nature and lack of mercy, El Lobo ruled the underworld with an iron grip. He had no room for weakness, no time for compassion. Those who worked for him feared him, and anyone who crossed him found themselves at the bottom of a shallow grave. His name alone was enough to send a chill down anyone's spine. Isabella Cruz, on the other hand, had no connections to such a violent world. She was intelligent, hard-working, and had big dreams for her future. But it was this very ambition that caught the attention of Alejandro Herrera. A forbidden relationship started in the shadows, hidden away from the eyes of the world. What started as a love affair became something far more dangerous. Herrera saw in Isabella not just a lover, but a tool, someone who could help him expand his empire in ways he had not yet imagined. But Isabella, naive and trusting, never saw the danger lurking behind the allure of wealth and power. As the affair deepened, so did the threats. With each passing day, Isabella's life became more entangled with Alejandro's, until it was too late to walk away. In the heart of Miami, where the sun sets behind towering skyscrapers and the city pulses with life, a forbidden love affair began. To the outside world, Isabella Cruz was just another ambitious woman working hard to climb the corporate ladder. Alejandro Herrera, known as El Lobo, was a name whispered in fear across the criminal world, a man who controlled more than just the streets. He controlled the lives of those who dared to cross him. They met in a way that seemed innocent at first, a chance encounter between two worlds that should have never collided. But what began as a brief spark between a businesswoman and a cartel kingpin quickly turned into something neither of them could escape. Isabella was drawn to Alejandro's power, his charm, and the allure of a world so far beyond anything she'd ever known. Alejandro saw in Isabella not just a woman, but a potential ally, a tool he could use to expand his empire. Neither of them understood just how dangerous this affair would become. But behind the polished cars, the expensive dinners, and the private getaways, something darker was unfolding. This wasn't just a romance, it was a ticking time bomb. And as their affair continued, so did the consequences. Because in Alejandro's world, there are no secrets. Every whispered conversation, every hidden rendezvous, carried a price that Isabella, in her innocence, would soon have to pay. Isabella and Alejandro's affair started out of sight, far from the eyes of the public. It was their little secret, hidden from the world that would never understand. But as their romance deepened, so did the stakes. It was the kind of affair that could destroy not just careers, but lives. Isabella, with her financial expertise, began to navigate the treacherous waters of Alejandro's empire. He took her deeper into the world he controlled, the underworld of Miami, where crime was king, and everything had a price. At first, Isabella believed she could maintain control. She thought she could keep her career intact, her reputation unscathed, while indulging in the luxury that came with Alejandro's world. But soon she realized she was no longer just a lover. She was entangled in a web so complex that even her sharp mind couldn't see the danger until it was too late. As whispers of their secret affair began to circulate, the stakes only grew higher. What had been a private relationship now became a ticking time bomb. Alejandro, ever the strategist, saw Isabella as more than a mere mistress. She had become a liability, a potential threat to everything he had worked for. The cartel, with its operations running through every corner of Miami, couldn't afford the risk of a loose end. Isabella's presence in Alejandro's life, once a sign of power and luxury, was now a potential crack in the empire he'd built. She was no longer a lover to be hidden away. She had become a threat that needed to be silenced. The more rumors swirled about their relationship, the more dangerous her existence became. What was once a secret had the potential to bring down everything, unraveling not just Alejandro's empire, but the lives of everyone involved. Isabella made the fatal mistake of exposing their affair. In the world Alejandro Herrera ruled, silence was not just an expectation, it was a command. Isabella, however, was no longer willing to live in the shadows. Perhaps it was revenge. Maybe it was a cry for help. But whatever her reasons, she made a decision that would alter the course of her life forever. On a fateful afternoon, Isabella went public with the secret that had been kept under lock and key for so long. She revealed Alejandro Herrera as her lover. The statement rocked the city of Miami. It was bold, brash, and brazen. Isabella painted a picture of a man, one who was not just a feared cartel leader, but a man capable of love, capable of connection. She exposed a side of Alejandro that no one had seen, a side he had desperately kept hidden. To many, her revelation felt like an act of defiance, a woman tired of living in fear, a woman demanding to be heard. But to those who understood the rules of the world Alejandro inhabited, Isabella's words were a betrayal of the highest order. It was a fatal mistake, a mistake that would not go unpunished. The cartel world operates by one unbreakable law. Loyalty is everything. A betrayal, no matter how seemingly small, is met with swift and unforgiving consequences. And in Alejandro's mind, there was no room for anything else. The public exposure of their affair was not just a mistake. It was a threat. It meant that Isabella had crossed a line, and once you cross that line, there's no turning back. Alejandro was a man who ruled with a steel grip. He trusted no one, and no one trusted him. Loyalty in his empire was not earned through love or kindness, but through fear. Isabella had betrayed that loyalty, and in doing so she had become expendable. Her bold move had given others a glimpse into his private life, a glimpse that could potentially unravel everything he had worked for. That was something Alejandro would not allow. He wasted no time in making his decision. This wasn't a man who hesitated. The wheels were already in motion. He could not afford to let anyone, least of all someone so close to him, break the silence. So, Alejandro made a ruthless decision. Isabella Cruz had to be eliminated. The message had to be sent loud and clear. There was no room for disloyalty in his world, and there would be no second chances. His decision was made with cold precision, a decision that would mark the end of Isabella's life. It wasn't just an execution. It was a statement. On the evening of March 12th, 2004, Isabella Cruz's life would come to a tragic and brutal end. The vibrant streets of Miami, known for their excitement and life, would soon be the backdrop to the end of an era for one woman who had dared to expose the truth. It was just after dusk when Isabella, unaware of the fate that awaited her, was lured to a quiet, secluded part of the city. It was a place she knew well, quiet, desolate streets far removed from the glamour of Miami's nightlife. Alejandro had orchestrated it all with chilling precision. He knew where to find her, knew where the shadows would swallow her, and knew that the crime would be hidden away in plain sight. As Isabella made her way down the dimly lit street, the last remnants of daylight fading, she couldn't have known that her life was about to end. She walked with purpose, her footsteps echoing in the silence of the street. And it was there, in the shadows, that the cartel's enforcers waited. They didn't speak. There was no need for words. What needed to be done was already understood. The execution was swift, almost clinical. Isabella's body fell to the ground in seconds. The noise, if there was any, was swallowed by the quiet that surrounded them. No one heard the gunshot. No one saw the blood that stained the pavement. By the time the authorities arrived, it was already too late. Her life, her love affair with the most feared man in Miami, had come to a violent and tragic end. Isabella Cruz, once a rising star in the corporate world, was found dead, her body discarded as if it had never mattered. In a city known for its secrets, hers would never be told. And the man who once claimed to love her, the man who once promised her a future in the luxury of his world, had ensured she would never see another day. Her death sent shock waves through Miami, but those closest to Alejandro knew better than to speak. The cartel had no tolerance for weakness, and betrayal was met with the ultimate price. But this wasn't the end. The investigation into Isabella's death seemed to stall, the authorities unable to uncover more than the basic details of the crime. However, days after her execution, a surprising twist came to light, one that would change everything. Isabella, even in death, had one last secret to reveal. It came in the form of a cryptic note, a letter left behind in her apartment. A note that, when found, sent shockwaves through the investigation. The contents were chilling. In her final moments, Isabella had written down names of powerful individuals who had long been hiding in the shadows of Miami's elite. She had named those who were connected to Alejandro Herrera's cartel, people who were untouchable, people who seemed beyond reproach. The letter, brief yet full of details, painted a picture of corruption that ran deep through the very fabric of the city. It wasn't just a love affair turned deadly. It was far bigger than that. This final revelation wasn't about the affair. It was about a network of power and influence that stretched into the highest echelons of Miami's political and business circles. In a single stroke, Isabella had exposed the very people who, for years, had been quietly pulling the strings behind closed doors. And with that letter, She had set in motion a chain of events that would threaten to tear apart everything Alejandro Herrera had worked for. It wasn't just about a cartel anymore. It was about a conspiracy at the heart of the city, one that connected the criminal underworld to the polished facade of Miami's most influential figures. The content of that letter was more than anyone could have anticipated. It was as if Isabella had left behind a blueprint, a map to the very corruption that had been allowed to flourish under the radar for years. There were names, big names, politicians, business tycoons, and even law enforcement officers who had been in Alejandro's pocket for decades. She had connected the dots, revealing a web of corruption that spanned far beyond the cartel itself. This final secret threatened to do more than just expose Alejandro's empire. It threatened to bring down some of the most powerful figures in Miami. People who thought themselves untouchable, who had lived under the protection of their connections, would now have to answer for their roles in the deadly game Alejandro played. Isabella had unknowingly set the stage for a massive political and criminal reckoning. The question now was, how far would Alejandro go to protect himself? He had already killed once, and now, with these revelations, it seemed there would be no length to which he wouldn't go to erase any trace of the scandal. But this time, it wasn't just Isabella he needed to silence. It was the truth, and the truth was a far more dangerous enemy than any lover. Isabella's note was a Pandora's box. Once opened, there would be no closing it again. The names she revealed were not just criminal associates. They were pillars of society, people whose influence reached far beyond the streets of Miami. And now those people were all connected to Alejandro's empire, all linked together in a conspiracy so intricate, so deeply embedded, that pulling it apart could destroy everything. But as the authorities moved in, Alejandro knew the clock was ticking. He could no longer afford to sit back and let the truth spread. The game had changed. He would have to make sure the final secret, Isabella's cryptic letter, was buried for good. And to do that, he would have to eliminate any trace of it, no matter the cost. But could he silence the truth before it shattered everything? Isabella's final secret didn't just stir the pot. It ignited a full-blown firestorm. The shocking revelation sent ripples through Miami's criminal underworld, and suddenly, everything Alejandro Herrera had worked so hard to protect was at risk. In the aftermath of her death, whispers spread like wildfire. Could this bombshell finally be the key to bringing Alejandro down? Could the powerful cartel boss, known for his ruthless reign over the streets, finally meet his end? The fallout was felt far beyond the tight-knit circle of Alejandro's closest associates. The names Isabella had written down in her letter were now circulating in shadowy corners of the city. Some said the cartel quickly moved to erase all traces of the evidence, silencing any who could spill the truth. But was it really that simple? Could the truth have already started to surface, no matter how hard Alejandro and his allies tried to bury it? Many believed the cartel would act swiftly, disposing of anyone who could be connected to Isabella's final revelations. And there were those who claimed that, despite their best efforts, some of the key players were already slipping up. Perhaps Alejandro's empire had grown too vast, too complicated for even him to control. Some speculated that his long reign was starting to crack, that the cracks in the facade were starting to show. The secrecy he'd worked so hard to maintain now seemed more fragile than ever before. Could the truth, which had been locked away in the shadows for so long, finally be coming to light? And if it was, who would be left to pick up the pieces of this broken empire? As the investigation into Isabella's death continued, a flurry of theories emerged, each more dramatic than the last. Some suggested that the cartel had moved with terrifying precision, erasing every lead, every piece of evidence that could implicate Alejandro and his allies. In their world, erasing the past was an art form, a way to ensure that nothing could ever come back to haunt them. But what if they hadn't been able to stop it? What if, despite their ruthless attempts to cover their tracks, the truth had already begun to slip through their fingers? Some believed the walls were closing in on Alejandro, that his reign of terror was coming to a close. After all, how many times could one man get away with murder? The cartel, for all its power, was not invincible. And as the authorities closed in, some hinted that Alejandro himself was growing increasingly paranoid, terrified of the final repercussions of Isabella's revelations. Had the tables finally turned on him? Others, however, remained skeptical. They wondered if anyone would ever truly have the courage to expose the full extent of Alejandro's empire. Powerful figures in Miami were deeply entrenched in the cartel's operations: politicians, businessmen, even law enforcement. Could they be counted on to do what was right, or would they sweep the truth under the rug, protecting their own interests at all costs? With Isabella's letter out in the open, the questions mounted. Could the truth truly bring down Alejandro? Was this the beginning of the end for one of the most feared cartels in the city? Or was this just another false hope? Another moment of fleeting justice in a world where power, fear, and corruption ruled the day? As the story unfolded, the stakes kept rising. With every piece of new evidence, the tension in Miami seemed to grow. Could Alejandro remain untouchable for much longer? Or was this the moment that would mark the fall of a kingpin who had ruled with an iron fist for far too long? As more whispers of the truth spread and more people came forward with their own accounts, it became increasingly clear that the walls of Alejandro's empire were beginning to crack. For the first time in years, there was a real chance that this cartel boss could finally face the consequences of his actions. But was it enough to topple everything he had built? Or would the forces protecting him prove too powerful to overcome? As Isabella's secrets come to light, one burning question remains. Could the bombshell revelations she left behind actually bring justice to Florida? Or was Alejandro's cartel simply too powerful to be brought down? Could this final act of defiance change the fate of an entire city, or would the truth be buried once again under layers of corruption and fear? I want to hear from you. What do you think about the secrets Isabella left behind? Was this the key to finally unraveling Alejandro's empire, or was it too little, too late? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Was Isabella's courage enough to bring about real change? Or did the cartel's grip on power prove too strong? And while you're at it, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to stay up to date with the latest in true crime stories like this one. I'm curious to hear your theories and opinions, so don't hold back. Share them with us. But just when you thought the case was over, a shocking revelation emerged, one that no one could have anticipated, a twist that could change everything. What was this final bombshell, and how might it completely alter Alejandro's fate? The answers may be more unexpected than you could ever imagine. We'll be revisiting this case in our next video, where we'll uncover new leads, dive deeper into the investigation, and reveal shocking updates you won't want to miss. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next chapter in this unbelievable story. So, what's the real story behind the Miami Cartel execution? Was Isabella Cruz simply another casualty in a deadly game of power and deceit? Or did she leave behind a secret so explosive that it could unravel the very foundation of Alejandro Herrera's empire? The truth, it seems, is still out there, but how much longer will it remain hidden? If you enjoyed this deep dive into the cartel's dark underworld, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more gripping true crime stories, and ring the bell for notifications so you never miss an update. We've got many more twists, turns, and shocking revelations coming your way. Stay tuned.